Welcome back to Trending Tidbits. You know, today we're diving into this fascinating world of memory,
Oh, yeah.
how it all works and why sometimes it can be so unreliable
Right.
and, just how it shapes our lives.
It really does. It's a really timely topic, too. With
Yeah.
just the amount of information
Yeah.
that's just like constantly flying at us these days.
Right.
Understanding, how memory works,
Yeah.
like more important than ever, you think.
Absolutely. And to help guide us through this little mental adventure,
Okay.
we have Charan Ranganath's book,
Yeah.
Why We Remember, The Science of Memory and How It Shapes Us.
Such a good book.
It is, and it's gotten, tons of praise from, experts in the field.
Yeah. And, his approach is really unique. I
Yeah.
think he kind of flips the script on, how a lot of people talk about memory.
Right.
Instead of focusing on why we forget, like why do we have such bad memories? He's like,
Well,
well, why do we remember? What is the point of memory? And he really argues that, it's so central to who we are,
Yeah.
to, how we make decisions, our identity, our happiness,
right.
all of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what are some of the big questions that, this book is tackling?
Well, I think a big one is how do our memories influence, the choices that we make today,
Oh,
even how they shape our future?
interesting.
Why do we remember something so vividly
Mhm.
that, might seem totally insignificant?
Mm.
And then we forget these other things that seem really important.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can do to make our memories more reliable?
Yeah.
And, how do emotions and stress, even sleep,
Yeah.
all affect what we remember?
Those are some big questions.
Yeah.
I like it. So, the book opens with this story about Ranganath himself and how he's forgotten most of his daughter's birthday parties,
Oh, yeah.
even though he filmed them,
Right.
except for this one that was really unusual.
It's such a good example of like, our brains prioritize the things that like really stand out to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think this idea of neural plasticity comes in.
Yeah.
It's like this, amazing ability of our brains to just like change and adapt
Right.
based on, what we've experienced.
Yeah.
And it does this by strengthening the connections between neurons.
Yeah.
So if we have an experience and it's really distinctive or, emotionally powerful or whatever,
Right.
those neural connections get like, reinforced,
Okay.
which makes those memories much more likely to stick around.
Interesting. So that one-of-a-kind birthday party,
Yeah.
creates a stronger neural pathway
Uh-huh.
than, all the ones that are kind of just like routine, the same old, same old.
Right. It's like novelty is really important for memory.
Yeah. It kind of makes you think about, how we can be more intentional in our own lives about creating those,
Prevention.
memorable experiences for ourselves and others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we think about, oh, I want to remember this thing, but we don't really think about what are we doing to actually make it memorable.
Yeah.
And Ranganath also talks about how important attention is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can't just, passively experience something and then expect to remember it later.
Oh, right. It's like when you're, distracted while you're putting down your keys or something.
Exactly.
And then later, you can't for the life of you remember where they are.
Yeah, and you're like, I know I put them down somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there, but I
You weren't really there.
wasn't really there.
Like, your body was there, but your mind was somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so your prefrontal cortex, which is, the part of your brain that kind of acts as like a command center,
Right?
that's really important for focusing your attention,
Yeah.
which is, essential for forming those strong memories. And if you're not paying attention, those memories are much more likely to just kind of like fade away.
Interesting. So paying attention is like, step number one. But then what about the different types of memory?
Okay.
I remember reading about, things like episodic versus semantic memory.
Right. Yeah, that's a really crucial distinction.
Okay.
So episodic memory is the one that allows you to like relive specific events.
Okay.
Like you can almost like travel back in time and, access all those sensory details, the
Yeah.
sights, the sounds, the emotions.
Right.
It's like that unusual birthday party that Ranganath remembers so vividly.
Okay.
And then semantic memory is more about, general knowledge and facts.
Okay.
So it's like knowing that Paris is in France,
Right.
but not necessarily remembering a specific trip you took there.
Okay. Got it. And he talks about how episodic memory is what really sets human learning apart from artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
So, AI is amazing at recognizing patterns,
Right.
following rules,
Yeah.
but it really struggles with those, exceptions to the rules in unique situations. Whereas episodic memory, that's what allows us to learn from those exceptions
Right.
and adapt and be flexible in a way that AI just, isn't quite capable of yet.
So even if something goes against the general rule, we can still hold on to that specific experience.
Exactly.
Interesting. And where does the hippocampus fit into all of this?
Oh, the hippocampus is like, the memory indexer of the brain.
Okay.
It's so crucial for creating and retrieving those rich contextual episodic memories.
Okay.
Like imagine, a massive library,
Right.
and the hippocampus is like the librarian that's helping you locate that one specific book.
Okay, I can picture that.
Yeah,
So we have these, amazing memory systems,
we do.
but we all know they're not perfect.
Yeah. No, they're definitely not perfect.
And Ranganath talks about, memory being reconstructive.
Right. It's not like a video recording. It's
Right.
much more like putting together a puzzle.
Yeah.
But, you don't have all the pieces.
Some are missing.
Yeah. And we kind of use, those schemas that we talked about,
Yeah.
those mental frameworks to help organize the information, but that can lead to distortions.
So you fill in the gaps without even realizing it a lot
Well,
of the time.
exactly.
And that's, why eyewitness testimony can be so unreliable.
Right. It's like that study he mentions where they implanted false memories in people
Yeah.
and like made them believe that they were lost in a mall as a kid.
Oh, it's so crazy.
It's wild.
Isn't it?
Pretty unsettling when you think about it
Yeah.
because it makes you think like, what else am I misremembering?
Right. Like how much of what we think we remember is actually accurate.
Right.
It's kind of scary.
And it gets even more complex when you start factoring in things like, emotions and stress and all that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because, speaking of emotions, those can be such powerful triggers for memories.
Absolutely.
Like a song can come on and all of a sudden you're transported back to this, specific moment.
Yeah. Or a smell,
Yeah.
a certain scent can just like bring back a flood of memories. Totally. And I
Right?
think that's because the amygdala is, involved.
Right. The amygdala is like the threat detector of the brain.
Right.
And it's really involved in, linking those emotions to memories.
Especially those tied to survival.
Right. Because, from an evolutionary perspective,
Yeah.
it's really important to remember those experiences that were dangerous
Right.
so that you can avoid them in the future.
Right. It's like when you remember a scary experience, it's not just the, event that you're remembering.
Yeah.
You can like feel it again.
Totally. You're like reliving it almost.
Yeah. And Ranganath talks about how chronic stress,
Yeah.
which, is unfortunately so common.
So prevalent these days.
Yeah.
It can actually impair, the prefrontal cortex
It does.
and impact our memory function.
Yeah. So basically stress makes it harder to focus and remember things.
Ugh, that's not good.
No, it's not. And, he shares this anecdote about his time working at a VA hospital.
With veterans and, one veteran in particular who had experienced a lot of trauma,
Right.
really struggled with memory issues and mental health challenges.
Oh, wow.
And it just, highlights how profound that impact of stress can be on our cognitive abilities.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that, taking care of our mental well-being is crucial for having a good memory, too.
Absolutely. It's not just about, eating the right foods and getting enough exercise. It's about managing stress.
Right.
And taking care of our mental health as well.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about, episodic memory, semantic memory,
Mm-hmm.
the impact of stress. But what about that feeling of familiarity?
Okay.
Like when you see someone and you're convinced you've met them before,
Right.
but you just can't place them.
Oh, yeah. That's happened to me so many times.
Happens to all of us.
It's such a weird feeling.
Yeah, it's a fascinating aspect of memory.
It is.
And it's not just limited to faces. We can experience it with places,
Oh, yeah.
objects, even like entire situations.
Right. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you've been there before, even though you know you haven't?
Yeah.
That's a familiarity at play.
Yeah, that's wild. Ranganath talks about, deja vu and how it relates to the perihinal cortex,
Oh, yeah.
which is, this part of the brain that deals with, recognizing things as familiar.
Right. So it's like our brain is constantly scanning for anything familiar.
Interesting.
And, that feeling of familiarity, it can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It can even influence our judgments and decisions.
You mean we might be more likely to trust someone just because they seem familiar, even
Yeah.
if we don't actually know them?
Exactly. And this has implications for everything, like advertising,
Right.
eyewitness testimony,
Yeah.
political campaigns.
Right.
We're drawn to what's familiar,
Right.
even if it's not necessarily the best choice.
That's kind of unnerving when you put it that way.
Yeah, it's a little bit spooky, isn't it?
Because it makes you realize how much our decisions can be swayed
Right.
by something as subtle as just a feeling.
Right. Like we think we're being rational.
Right.
But really, a lot of times our decisions are driven by these unconscious processes.
So how can we become more aware of these, subtle influences on our memory?
That's the big question.
How can we avoid falling into those familiarity traps?
Well, I think one key is just recognizing that familiarity isn't always a reliable sign of truth or accuracy.
Right.
It's just the signal from our brain saying, hey, I've encountered this before,
Yeah.
but it doesn't tell us why or in what context.
Right.
So we have to kind of dig a little deeper.
Okay. And Ranganath also brings up facial recognition bias,
Yes.
both in humans and in AI.
Uh-huh.
How does that tie into familiarity?
Well, both humans and AI systems can develop biases toward recognizing faces
Right.
that are similar to the ones that they've been exposed to most often.
Okay.
So, if an AI system is mostly trained on images people
Right.
from a certain demographic,
Yeah.
it might struggle to accurately recognize faces from other groups.
Right.
And the same thing can happen with humans.
Okay.
If you've grown up in a homogenous environment,
Yeah.
you might have more difficulty recognizing faces from different racial or ethnic backgrounds.
Right.
And so it highlights the need for diverse training data for AI
Yeah.
and, diverse experiences for us humans.
Makes sense.
Like,
Okay, so now shifting gears a bit. Ranganath talks about this thing called reflex.
oh, yeah.
What is that all about?
Okay, so this is where we revisit Pavlov,
Okay.
but not just his famous dogs.
Right.
Pavlov was actually really fascinated by how animals, including humans,
Uh-huh.
respond to novelty, to things that are new and unexpected.
Okay.
And he noticed that when we encounter something surprising,
Yeah.
it triggers this instinctive urge in us to figure out what's going on.
Okay.
And he called this the what is it reflex.
He actually called it that. What is it?
He did.
That's great.
It's so descriptive, though.
It is.
Because it's that feeling you get when you're caught off guard by something.
Yeah.
And your brain is just instantly shifting into investigation mode.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Right.
So how does this, reflex relate to memory?
Because surprise and curiosity can actually enhance memory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when something unexpected happens,
Yeah.
it grabs our attention.
Oh.
And as we talked about, attention is crucial for encoding memories.
So those aha moments
Yeah.
are more likely to stick with us.
Oh, exactly.
Interesting. And you're telling me that curiosity is linked to the brain's reward system.
Yes.
Wait, so learning new things is actually rewarding for our brains?
It is. It's like our brains are wired to seek out new information.
That's so cool.
It is. And that's why curiosity is such a powerful force for learning and exploration.
Right. It pushes us to, make sense of the world around us.
Exactly.
I'm thinking about trivia night.
Oh, yeah.
I always remember the answers to those questions that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, totally. And Ranganath's research has actually found that even when we're curious about one specific thing,
Right.
that heightened state of curiosity can make us more receptive to learning about other things, too.
Oh, wow.
It's like the spillover effect.
Interesting.
So, if you can cultivate that sense of curiosity,
Yeah.
you're basically priming your brain
Okay.
to learn and remember more.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Okay. So we've covered quite a bit. We've talked about, the power of distinctive experiences, the importance of attention, the reconstructive nature of memory,
Yes.
the influence of emotions and stress,
Right.
the role of familiarity, and now this, reflex and curiosity.
Uh-huh. And we can't forget about sleep.
Oh, right. Sleep is crucial for memory consolidation.
It is. It's like the ultimate memory enhancer.
Tell me more about that.
So basically, think of sleep as your brain's overnight filing system.
Okay.
While you're sleeping, your brain is hard at work.
Yeah.
Processing all the experiences from the day, strengthening those connections between neurons that represent those memories.
Okay.
And so if we don't get enough sleep, our memories suffer.
Okay. So sleep deprivation is a no-no.
It's a big no-no for your memory.
Yeah.
Ranganath actually talks about how research has shown that sleep can transform rote memorization
Right.
into usable knowledge.
Okay.
So it's not just about, memorizing facts. It's
Yeah.
about integrating those facts with what you already know.
Okay. So getting enough sleep is a must, not just for, our physical health, but for our cognitive function as well.
Absolutely.
Right. I'm officially convinced I'm going to get some sleep.
You should.
But now let's move into this, I think, really fascinating area of social memory.
Okay.
Because, our memories aren't formed in a vacuum.
Or not.
They're shaped by, our interactions with other people.
Right. We're social creatures.
Right.
And so, our memories are influenced by the people around us.
Yeah. It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. Our social circles have a huge impact on us.
Right. And Ranganath introduces this idea of life narratives.
Yeah.
Which are basically the stories that we create about ourselves.
Right.
And it turns out that, our parents, our peers, our partners play a huge role in shaping those narratives.
They do. Because they contribute to the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Right. So the way people talk about us, the way they remember events,
Yeah,
it influences our own memories of those things.
it does. And there's actually some really interesting research on how groups can impact memory.
Okay.
So have you ever noticed how sometimes it's harder to remember things when you're trying to recall them with a group of people?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like you and your friends are trying to remember what happened last weekend,
Exactly.
and it all gets jumbled up.
Right, everyone's throwing out different details.
Yeah.
And it's like interfering with each other's memories. That's called collaborative inhibition.
Collaborative inhibition.
It's kind of a mouthful, but basically
Yeah.
it's when we're trying to recall things in a group, we can actually interfere with each other's memories.
That's so interesting.
It is. And then on the flip side, Ranganath also talks about how couples can actually help each other remember things better.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's called collaborative facilitation.
Okay.
And so couples can often bolster each other's memories by drawing on their different strengths and perspectives.
Oh, that makes sense.
They kind of fill in the gaps for each other.
Yeah, like when you and your partner are trying to remember a movie you watched together,
Exactly.
and you're like, oh, what was the name of that actor? And your partner's like, oh, yeah, I remember it was this person.
Right. One person remembers the plot details.
Right.
The other remembers who the actors were.
And together you can kind of put together the whole picture.
Right. It's like teamwork for your memory.
I like it.
Mm.
But social memory also gets a little bit, darker, I guess.
Yeah. There's definitely a darker side to it.
What do you mean?
So Ranganath also explores this idea of social contagion,
Okay.
where distortions in memory can actually spread through groups of people.
Okay. So if one person misremembers something, other people in the group might start believing that false memory too.
Exactly. And this has huge implications for how we understand things like fake news and propaganda,
Right.
even historical narratives.
Right, because our memories aren't just influenced by individuals, but also by the groups that we belong to.
Right. We're constantly, sharing our memories with each other.
Right.
And those shared memories can kind of take on a life of their own.
So this collective memory can be extremely powerful,
It can.
shaping our understanding of the world and, our place in it.
Yeah,
But it's crucial to remember that it's not always accurate or objective.
totally. And, Ranganath even talks about push-pulls,
Right.
which are those, manipulative surveys
Yeah.
that are designed to plant specific ideas or beliefs in people's minds.
Oh.
And they're a perfect example of how our collective memory can be exploited,
For sure.
especially for political gain.
So it's scary when you think about how vulnerable our memories can be to these outside influences.
It is. And I think that's why it's so important to be mindful of, the information that we're exposed to.
So how can we be more critical of information, especially in this day and age with, social media
Right.
and just like information overload?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's something that, Ranganath really wants us to think about.
Yeah.
I think a key takeaway is to be mindful of the sources of information that
Right.
we're exposed to. So don't just passively absorb everything you see and hear.
Yeah.
Actively seek out diverse perspectives.
So don't just rely on, your social media feed or your usual news sources.
Right.
Branch out.
Branch out.
Yeah.
And challenge your own assumptions.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also important to develop a healthy level of skepticism. So don't just accept things at face value.
Yeah.
Ask questions, consider the motivations of the source,
Right.
and be open to changing your mind when presented with new evidence.
So be a detective of your own mind.
I love that analogy.
Right. Question everything.
We need to be curious.
Yeah.
We need to be discerning.
Yeah.
And we need to be constantly evaluating the information that we're taking in.
I like that. Okay, so next time on Trending Tidbits, we're going to continue our discussion of memory
Okay.
with Charan Ranganath's book.
Awesome.
So be sure to join us then.
Looking forward to it.
Right. Thanks for listening.
See ya.
So it sounds like we need to be, active participants in shaping our own memories
Yeah,
and our understanding of the world.
absolutely. We can't just be passive absorbers of information. We have to engage with it critically.
Right. And Ranganath really emphasizes that memory isn't static,
Right.
that it's dynamic.
It's constantly evolving as we encounter, new experiences and information.
So it's not like our memories are these, fixed recordings of the past.
No, not at all.
Yeah, okay.
It's more like we're telling ourselves stories.
Okay.
And those stories can be rewritten and revised over time.
Right.
Think about it. Have you ever noticed how, a memory can feel different when you recall it years later?
Yeah.
Maybe the details have shifted or the emotional impact isn't as strong.
Right.
That's your memory evolving.
Interesting. So it's really important to be mindful of the stories that we're telling ourselves.
Right.
Both individually and as a society.
Totally.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of the biases
Right.
and influences that shape our memories.
Yeah.
And we need to be willing to challenge those narratives.
When necessary.
Yeah, when necessary.
Ranganath ends the book with this really thought-provoking quote. He says, "Everyone is the poet of their memories.
Oh, yeah.
But like the best poems, they're also never really finished.
Hmm.
Because they gain new meaning as time reveals them in different lights."
I love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a good reminder that our memories are so much more than just the past.
Yeah.
They're also about how we make sense of the present
Right.
and, envision the future.
Totally. It's all connected.
It is all connected.
Yeah.
So I think the big takeaway here is that, our memories are this precious part of who we are.
They are.
But we need to approach them with both curiosity
Yes.
and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't just blindly trust everything you remember.
Right.
Question it. Dig a little deeper.
Be a memory detective.
Exactly.
Right? So I think that's a great place to wrap up this episode of Trending Tidbits.
Okay.
We've been exploring this fascinating world of memory
Wow, so much to think about.
with Charan Ranganath's book, Why We Remember.
Such a good book.
So be sure to check it out if you want to, delve even deeper into this topic.
I highly recommend it.
And until next time, keep those memories flowing.
Yes.
But don't be afraid to question those stories.
Absolutely.
Telling yourself.
All right. Thanks for listening.
See you next time. So it sounds like we really need to be, those active participants in shaping our own memories.
Yeah.
And, how we understand the world around us.
Absolutely.
Right.
We can't just, sit back and passively absorb information.
Right.
We have to really engage with it critically.
And Ranganath really emphasizes that, memory, it's not static.
Right.
It's dynamic.
It's constantly changing,
Yeah.
as we're encountering these new experiences and new information.
So our memories aren't these, fixed recordings of the past.
Nope, not at all.
Okay.
They're more like stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And those stories can be, rewritten and revised over time.
Have you ever noticed how a memory can feel different?
Oh, yeah.
When you recall it years later?
Totally.
Maybe the details have shifted a little bit, or the emotional impact isn't as strong.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I remember that being way more intense.
Exactly.
It actually was.
So that's our memory evolving.
It is. Our memories are constantly evolving.
So that's why it's so important, I think, to be mindful of those stories that we're telling ourselves, both individually and as a society.
Totally. We need to be aware of, the biases and those influences that can shape our memories.
And be willing to challenge those narratives when it's necessary.
When appropriate. Yeah.
Ranganath, he ends the book with this really thought-provoking quote.
Okay.
And he says, "Everyone is the poet of their memories, but like the best poems, they're also never really finished."
Right?
Because they gain new meaning as time reveals them in different lights.
I love that quote.
It's a beautiful way to put it.
It is.
It's a good reminder, I think, that our memories, they're not just about the past.
Yeah.
They're about how we make sense of,
Right.
the present.
Right.
And envision the future.
Yeah. It's all connected.
It really is.
Yeah.
So I think, a big takeaway here is that our memories are such a precious part of who we are.
They really are.
But we need to approach them with both curiosity
Yes.
and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't blindly trust everything that we remember.
Question everything.
Right. Be a memory detective.
Exactly.
So I think that's a great place to wrap up, this episode of Trending Tidbits.
Right.
We've been exploring this fascinating world of memory.
It's a fascinating world.
It is. With Charan Ranganath's book, Why We Remember.
Such a good one.
If you want to learn more, go check it out.
Highly recommend.
And until next time, keep those memories flowing.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to, question those stories that you're telling yourself.
Be curious.
All right. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.